Los Angeles, 1969. The lights of the television studio burned brighter than the city outside. Thousands of people were watching from their homes that night, expecting another entertaining evening of jokes, music, and celebrity interviews. The cameras were ready. The audience was laughing. The host was rehearsing his opening lines one last time. And backstage, Elvis Presley sat quietly in his dressing room. He had already spent years learning how to handle crowds. He knew how to smile when cameras appeared. He knew how to make an audience scream with a single movement. He knew how to walk onto a stage and become the man everyone expected him to be. But that night, nobody knew that a 7-year-old girl was about to remind him of the boy he had once been. A boy who had nothing but a dream. A boy who had once held a cheap guitar and wondered whether anyone in the world would ever listen to him. Elvis looked at his reflection in the mirror. His black hair was carefully styled. His black leather jacket looked almost perfect under the dressing room lights. A producer knocked on the door. "Mr. Presley, 5 minutes." Elvis nodded. "Thank you." The producer hesitated. "There's something else." Elvis turned around. "What is it?" "There's a little girl here, 7 years old. She's going to be on the show tonight." Elvis raised an eyebrow. "A singer?" "Sort of." "What does that mean?" The producer smiled nervously. "She brought a guitar." Elvis smiled. "Well, that's not unusual." The producer looked toward the hallway. "You'll understand when you see it." Then he walked away. Elvis sat there for another few seconds. Something about the producer's expression stayed in his mind. He stood up. As he walked toward the studio, he heard the audience applauding. The show had begun. The host welcomed the audience and introduced several guests. The laughter came easily. Everything seemed normal. Then, during a commercial break, Elvis noticed a small girl sitting near the side of the stage. She was wearing a simple cream-colored dress. Her brown hair fell over her shoulders, and in her lap was an old acoustic guitar. Elvis stopped walking. The guitar looked terrible. The wood was scratched and faded. Large areas of the finish had disappeared. One side had been repaired with what looked like an old piece of tape. The instrument looked as if it had survived years of being carried through places it was never meant to visit. Elvis stared at it. Then he looked at the girl. She noticed him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then she smiled shyly. Elvis smiled back. "You play that thing?" The girl looked down at the guitar. "Yes, sir." Elvis laughed softly. "Does it play you back?" She giggled. "Sometimes." That answer made Elvis laugh. The nervousness in the girl's face disappeared for a moment. "What's your name?" "Emily." "Well, Emily, that's a mighty old guitar." "It belonged to my father." Elvis looked at her more carefully. "Your father?" She nodded. "He taught me." Something changed in Elvis's expression. He knew immediately that there was a story behind those words. Before he could ask another question, the stage manager called everyone back. The cameras were rolling again. The host turned toward the audience. "And now, we have a very special young guest with us tonight." The audience applauded. Emily walked onto the stage. Her hands were trembling. The host crouched beside her. "Are you nervous?" Emily nodded. "A little." "A little?" She nodded again. The audience laughed gently. Then the host pointed toward the guitar. "That's quite an instrument you've brought." Emily looked at it. "My father gave it to me." The audience became quieter. "And what are you going to play?" Emily looked toward Elvis. Nobody had expected that. The camera followed her eyes. Elvis was sitting a few feet away. He leaned forward. Emily whispered, "His song." The audience immediately reacted. The host turned toward Elvis. "Well, I think someone just volunteered you for something." Elvis laughed. "What are you going to play?" Emily looked at him. "Love Me Tender." The audience applauded. Elvis's smile became softer. "That's a beautiful song." Emily placed her fingers around the guitar. But there was a problem. The guitar wasn't in good condition. One string was visibly worn. The tuning was slightly off. A technician hurried toward her, but Emily shook her head. "I can do it." Elvis watched her carefully. The technician stepped away. The studio became silent. Emily took a deep breath. She touched the strings. The first chord came out rough, not polished, not perfect, but honest. Elvis stopped smiling. He listened. Emily continued. Her small fingers struggled with the chords. Every few seconds, the guitar made a strange, buzzing sound. Some audience members smiled, others leaned forward. And Elvis? Elvis wasn't looking at the guitar anymore. He was looking at the little girl's hands, small hands, determined hands, the kind of hands that reminded him of another time. A time when music wasn't about sold-out arenas. It wasn't about television ratings. It wasn't about fame. It was simply about feeling something and trying to make another human being feel it, too. Emily reached the first verse. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. But she didn't stop. Elvis lowered his eyes. Something inside him had begun to move. A quick question for you. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, if you were sitting in that studio in 1969, what would you have felt watching Emily perform on that broken guitar? Would you have been nervous for her? Would you have cheered? Or would you have been reminded of someone from your own childhood? Write your answer in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. Emily continued playing. The second verse began. Her voice became slightly stronger. She wasn't looking at the audience anymore. She wasn't looking at the cameras. She was looking at Elvis, and Elvis was looking directly back at her. For a moment, the television studio seemed to disappear. There were no cameras, no producers, no audience. Just a little girl with an old guitar, and a man who had spent his entire life trying to remember why he started making music in the first place. Emily reached the final lines. Her fingers slipped. One chord sounded wrong. She stopped for half a second. A few people in the audience gasped. Emily looked frightened. She looked at the guitar. Then she looked at Elvis. Elvis smiled. He nodded. "Just once. Keep going." That tiny gesture changed everything. Emily took another breath and continued. Her voice trembled, but she finished the song. The final note faded into silence. Nobody moved. For 2 seconds, the entire studio was completely still. Then the audience erupted. Applause filled the room. Emily looked stunned. She looked at Elvis, as if asking whether she had really done it. Elvis stood up. The applause became even louder. He walked toward her. Emily lowered her guitar. Elvis stopped in front of her. "You did good." Emily smiled. "Really?" Elvis nodded. "Really good." The host looked at Elvis. "You seemed pretty moved by that." Elvis didn't answer immediately. He looked down at the guitar. "Where did you get this?" Emily held it tighter. "It was my father's." "What happened to him?" Emily's smile disappeared. "My father passed away last year." The studio became silent again. Elvis's expression changed. He knelt down so that he was at her eye level. "I'm sorry," Emily nodded. "He used to play this for me." Elvis looked at the guitar. "Is that why you brought it tonight?" Emily nodded. He said that if I ever got scared, I should play. Elvis swallowed. And were you scared? Emily looked toward the audience. Yes. Then she looked at Elvis. But I remembered what he said. Elvis looked away for a moment. The cameras captured his face. For the first time that evening, the confident entertainer disappeared. There was only a man remembering. Years earlier, before the fame, before the expensive clothes and bright lights, Elvis had been a young boy from Mississippi who loved music. He remembered his mother. He remembered his first guitar. He remembered how impossible his dream had seemed. And suddenly, this little girl wasn't simply performing his song. She was carrying a memory, just as he had once carried his own. Elvis slowly reached toward the guitar. May I see it? Emily handed it to him. He turned it over carefully. He examined the scratches, the damaged wood, the worn bridge, the places where someone had clearly repaired it over the years. Then Elvis noticed something carved into the back. A small set of initials. He ran his fingers across them. Your father's initials? Emily nodded. He put them there. Elvis handed the guitar back. Then, this isn't a broken guitar. Emily looked confused. Elvis smiled. It's a guitar with a history. The audience applauded softly, but Elvis wasn't finished. He looked toward the musicians. Can we get another microphone? The host raised his eyebrows. What are you planning? Elvis smiled. I think Emily and I have another song to play. The audience exploded with applause. Emily's eyes became enormous. Me? Elvis nodded. You. The musicians prepared. The cameras moved closer. And somewhere behind the studio curtains, a producer whispered, This wasn't planned. He was right. Nobody had planned what was about to happen. Because Elvis Presley was about to sit beside a 7-year-old girl with a damaged guitar and turn an ordinary television appearance into a moment neither of them would ever forget. But there was one thing Elvis didn't know yet. The story behind Emily's guitar was far more painful than he had imagined. And when he discovered why her father had wanted her to bring that guitar to the studio that night, even Elvis wouldn't be able to hold back his tears. Musicians slowly took their places. The audience was still buzzing from Emily's performance. Elvis sat beside her. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at the old guitar resting across her small lap. Are you ready? He asked. Emily nodded. I think so. Elvis smiled. Don't think too much. Just play. The musicians began a soft introduction. Emily placed her fingers on the strings. Elvis listened. Then he began singing. His voice was calm and warm. Emily joined him. At first, her voice was almost too quiet to hear. But Elvis didn't overpower her. Instead, he lowered his own voice. He gave her space. The audience watched in complete silence. It was an unusual sight. One of the biggest stars in America sitting beside a 7-year-old girl, allowing her to lead the song with a battered old guitar. Emily made another mistake. She missed a chord. Elvis simply smiled. Keep going, she continued. And something remarkable happened. The more Emily played, the less nervous she became. Her fingers stopped shaking. Her voice grew stronger. By the final verse, she wasn't a frightened little girl anymore. She was performing. When the song ended, Elvis gently placed his hand on the guitar. That's the sound, he said. The host looked at him. The sound of what? Elvis stared at Emily. The reason we start singing in the first place. The audience applauded, but then the host remembered something. He looked at Emily. Your father taught you this song, didn't he? Emily nodded. Yes. Was he a musician? Emily shook her head. No, he just loved music. Elvis smiled. Sometimes that's all you need. The host continued carefully. And you said your father passed away last year? Emily nodded. Yes. There was a pause. How old were you? 6. The audience became quiet. Elvis looked down. Emily continued. He got sick. She paused. He couldn't play anymore. Elvis's eyes lifted toward her. So, you played for him? Emily nodded. Every night. A murmur moved through the audience. Emily looked at her guitar. Sometimes he couldn't talk. But when I played, he would smile. Elvis didn't move. The host's voice became softer. And why did you bring the guitar tonight? Emily hesitated. Then she reached into the pocket of her dress. She pulled out a small folded piece of paper. I was supposed to give this to Elvis. Elvis looked surprised. To me? Emily nodded. She handed him the paper. Elvis opened it. There were only a few handwritten lines. He read them silently. His expression changed. The audience couldn't hear what was written, but the cameras caught Elvis's face. He read the note again, then once more. His eyes became wet. The host noticed. Is everything okay? Elvis folded the paper carefully. Yes, but his voice had changed. The host waited. Finally, Elvis said, Her father wrote this before he died. Emily nodded. He told me to bring it if I ever met Elvis. Elvis looked at her. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Emily shrugged. I was scared. Elvis looked back at the note. He took a slow breath. Then he read the message aloud. Emily, if you ever get the chance to meet Elvis, don't ask him for anything. The audience listened. Elvis continued. Just tell him thank you. He stopped. The studio was silent. Elvis stared at the paper. Thank you for what? The host asked. Emily answered, For giving my father something to believe in. Elvis slowly looked toward her. Emily explained that her father had discovered Elvis's music when he was young. Whenever life became difficult, he would play Elvis records. He had told Emily that music had helped him through the hardest years of his life. Then, when Emily was born, he bought the old guitar. He couldn't afford a new one. So he found the damaged instrument at a small second-hand store. He repaired it himself. He taught Emily her first chords. He taught her how to sing. And every time she became frustrated, he told her, Don't worry about playing perfectly. Play honestly. Elvis closed his eyes. That sentence hit him harder than anything else. Because Elvis knew exactly what it meant. The world had spent years asking him to be perfect. Perfect performances, perfect appearances, perfect records, perfect television moments. But somewhere beneath all of that, music had always been something simpler, something honest, something that belonged to ordinary people. Elvis looked at Emily. Your father sounds like a good man. He was. I would have liked to meet him. Emily's eyes filled with tears. He would have liked you. Elvis smiled. I hope so. The audience applauded gently. Emily wiped her eyes. Then Elvis surprised everyone. He took off one of the rings from his hand. The audience immediately reacted. He looked at the ring, then at Emily. He didn't hand it to her. Instead, he placed it on the table beside the guitar. I want you to keep something. Emily stared at it. But I can't take that. You can. It's expensive. Elvis laughed softly. That's not why I'm giving it to you. He pointed toward the guitar. I want you to remember tonight. Emily looked at the ring, then at Elvis. But I don't want to forget my father. Elvis's smile disappeared. You won't. He leaned closer. You don't need a ring to remember him. He touched the old guitar. Every time you play this, he'll be there. Emily began crying. Elvis placed a hand gently on her shoulder. And that was when the audience started crying too. The cameras kept rolling. Nobody wanted to interrupt the moment. Even the host, who had spent years handling emotional television moments, seemed unable to find the right words. A quick question for everyone watching. If someone you loved gave you an old guitar, piano, photograph, watch, or another simple object before they passed away, would you keep it forever? Tell us your story in the comments, and tell us what city or country you're watching from. If this story is touching your heart, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves old music. Now let's go back to that studio in 1969, because Elvis was about to do something nobody expected. The host finally spoke. "Elvis, I have to ask you something." Elvis looked at him. "What? Why did that song affect you so deeply?" Elvis leaned back. He looked toward the audience, then toward Emily. "I don't know if I can explain it." The host waited. Elvis continued. "When I was young, music was different." He smiled faintly. "You didn't have much. You had a radio, maybe a record, maybe a guitar if you were lucky." The audience listened. "My family didn't have much money." Elvis looked at his hands. "But I had music." He paused. "And sometimes music can make you forget what you don't have." Emily watched him carefully. Elvis continued, "That little girl just reminded me of something." "What?" "Why I started." The room became quiet. Elvis wasn't speaking like a superstar anymore. He was speaking like a young man remembering the beginning of his life. He told the audience about the first time he understood that a song could change someone's mood. He talked about singing at church, about hearing voices rise together, about how music could make people laugh, cry, hope, and keep going. Then he looked at Emily. "Your father understood that." Emily nodded. "He said music was like a friend." Elvis smiled. "He was right." The host glanced at the guitar. "Are you really going to let her keep playing that thing?" Elvis laughed. "I hope she does. It looks like it's barely alive." The audience laughed. Emily smiled. Elvis picked up the guitar. He examined the damaged body. Then he noticed the loose bridge. "This thing needs help." Emily laughed. "It always sounds funny." "I noticed." Elvis turned toward a technician. "Do we have someone who can fix guitars?" The technician nodded. "Of course." Elvis shook his head. "No, not someone who can fix it." He looked at Emily. "Someone who can fix it without destroying its story." The audience applauded. The producer, standing backstage, suddenly realized that the show had changed completely. This was no longer a planned celebrity appearance. It had become something personal, something nobody could script. Elvis handed the guitar to the technician. "Take care of it." Emily immediately became nervous. "What are you doing?" Elvis smiled. "I'm borrowing it." "For how long?" "Just a little while." She looked worried. Elvis noticed. "You'll get it back." "Promise?" "Promise." He handed the guitar away. Then he turned toward the audience. "She's going to need a better one, too." Emily's eyes widened. "No!" Elvis laughed. "Yes. I don't need another guitar." "I didn't say you needed one." He paused. "I said you were getting one." The audience erupted. Emily looked overwhelmed. But Elvis wasn't finished. He told the producer to arrange for a new guitar to be delivered to Emily's home. Not to replace her father's guitar. Never that. The old guitar would be restored. The new one would simply give her another instrument to learn on. Emily looked at Elvis with tears in her eyes. "Why are you doing all this?" Elvis answered quietly. "Because someone once believed in me." He looked toward the audience. "And somebody should believe in you." That sentence brought another wave of applause. But then something unexpected happened. A stagehand walked toward the host. He whispered something into his ear. The host's expression changed. He looked at Elvis. Elvis, what? We just got a phone call. From who? The host hesitated. Emily's mother. Emily immediately looked toward him. Is she okay? The host nodded. She wants to say something. A telephone connection was arranged. A speaker was placed near the stage. Then a woman's trembling voice filled the studio. Hello? Emily's face lit up. Mom! The audience smiled. Her mother began crying. I can't believe you're there. Emily smiled. I played the song. I heard. There was a pause. Then her mother said, Your father would have been so proud. Emily's face changed. She looked down. Elvis placed a hand on her shoulder. Her mother continued. And Elvis leaned toward the microphone. Yes? Thank you. Elvis looked down. For what? For making my husband believe that dreams weren't foolish. Elvis swallowed. The woman continued. He used to tell Emily that one day she'd stand on a stage. Elvis looked at Emily. She did. Her mother laughed through tears. Yes. Then she said something that nobody in the studio expected. He also told me that if Emily ever met you, she should ask you one question. Elvis raised his eyebrows. What question? Her mother answered, Ask Elvis if he still believes in dreams. The studio became silent. Elvis looked at Emily. Then he looked at the cameras. For several seconds he said nothing. Finally, he smiled. Yes, his voice was quiet. I still do. Emily smiled. Elvis continued. Even when they don't come true exactly the way you imagined. He looked at the old guitar. Sometimes they become something better. The audience erupted in applause, and somewhere behind the cameras, a producer quietly wiped away a tear. But Elvis didn't know yet that the most emotional moment of the evening was still waiting for him. Because before the show ended, Emily's mother had one final request, and it would force Elvis to make a promise he would remember for the rest of his life. The studio remained silent after Emily's mother finished speaking. Elvis was still standing beside the little girl. The question hung in the air. Do you still believe in dreams? Elvis had answered yes, but somehow saying the words aloud made them feel heavier. He looked at Emily. She was holding her father's old guitar close to her chest. For a moment, Elvis seemed lost in thought. Then he leaned toward the microphone. Yes, he said again. I still believe in dreams. He paused. But I think sometimes we forget what dreams are supposed to do. The host looked at him. What do you mean? Elvis glanced toward the audience. A dream isn't supposed to make you better than everybody else. He looked at Emily. It's supposed to make you keep going when things get hard. Emily listened carefully. Elvis continued. Your father understood that. Emily wiped her eyes. He did. Then the voice of Emily's mother came through the speaker again. Elvis. Yes, ma'am? There's something else. Elvis waited. My husband left something for Emily. Emily immediately looked toward the microphone. What? Her mother laughed softly through tears. He recorded a message. Emily froze. What message? I didn't know whether I should play it tonight. The entire studio became still. Elvis slowly turned toward Emily. Her mother continued. But I think he would have wanted you to hear it now. A technician brought a small tape recorder onto the stage. The audience watched in silence. Emily stared at it. She suddenly looked frightened. Mom. I know, sweetheart. What did Dad say? Her mother took a breath. You'll hear it. The tape recorder clicked. There was a short burst of static. Then a man's voice came through the speakers. A little weak. A little tired. but warm. "Emily?" The girl covered her mouth. She recognized her father's voice immediately. Her eyes filled with tears. "Daddy." The recording continued. "If you're listening to this, then I guess you got brave enough to play for people." The audience was completely silent. Emily smiled through her tears. Her father's voice continued. "I know that guitar isn't much to look at." A few people laughed softly. "But don't ever be embarrassed by it." The recording paused briefly. "That guitar gave me something when I needed it." Elvis lowered his head. The man's voice continued. "When I first found it, I didn't know if it would even work." Emily smiled. "I fixed it as best as I could." Then came another pause. "I hope you keep playing." Emily was crying now. Her father continued. "Not because I want you to become famous." The audience listened. "I want you to play because music gives you a place to put all the feelings you don't know how to say." Elvis slowly looked toward the floor. The recording continued. "And if you're ever afraid—" There was a long pause. "Play anyway." Emily closed her eyes. Her father's final words came through the speakers. "And if one day you meet Elvis Presley." The audience smiled. Emily looked at Elvis. Her father's voice continued. "Tell him I said thank you." The recording ended. Silence. Nobody moved. Emily was crying openly. Elvis reached for her hand. He squeezed it gently. Then he turned toward the microphone. "I think your father just gave me a lesson." Emily looked at him. Elvis smiled sadly. "He reminded me that sometimes the people who aren't famous are the ones who understand life the best." The audience applauded. But Elvis wasn't interested in applause. He looked at Emily. "You know what your father gave you?" Emily shook her head. "A reason to keep going." Tell us what you think. If you were Emily, what would you do after hearing your father's final message? Would you keep the old guitar exactly as it was? Would you repair it? Or would you keep playing it until every scratch became another memory? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. If this story is making you feel something, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who believes music can change lives. Now, let's return to that unforgettable night in 1969. Elvis stood up. He looked toward the host. "I think we need to do something." The host smiled. "What?" Elvis pointed toward the musicians. "Let's play something." The musicians immediately prepared. Emily looked surprised. "Another song?" Elvis nodded. "But this time—" He looked at her guitar. "You choose." Emily thought for a moment. She looked at Elvis. "Can we play one of my father's favorite songs?" Elvis smiled. "Of course." "What was it?" Emily whispered the title. Elvis's expression changed. It was a song he knew well. A song about holding on. A song about finding strength when life seemed determined to take it away. The musicians began. Emily played the opening chords. This time the guitar sounded even rougher. But nobody cared. Elvis joined her. His voice filled the studio. Emily followed. The song grew slowly. The audience began swaying. Some people were crying. Others were smiling. And then something extraordinary happened. Emily stopped playing. Not because she forgot the chords, not because she was frightened. She simply stopped. Elvis looked at her. "What happened?" Emily whispered. "I can't remember the next part." Elvis smiled. "That's okay." He leaned toward her. "Sometimes you don't need to remember." Then he sang the next line. Emily listened. Then she joined him. The two voices came together. One belonged to a child who had lost her father. The other belonged to a man who had spent years becoming a legend. But for those few minutes, neither was a celebrity. Neither was a television guest. They were simply two people sharing a song. When the final note ended, the audience stood. The applause lasted nearly a minute. Elvis looked embarrassed. He waved for everyone to sit down. But they wouldn't. Emily looked around in disbelief. Then she looked at Elvis. "Why are they standing?" Elvis smiled. "Because you earned it." Emily shook her head. "We both did." Elvis laughed. "Fair enough." The host walked toward them. "I've been doing television for a long time." He looked at the audience. "I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this." Elvis nodded. "Neither have I." Then the host remembered something. "Elvis, you said earlier that you were going to help repair her guitar." "Yes." "Well," he looked toward backstage, "someone may already be working on it." The audience reacted. A technician appeared carrying the old guitar. Emily's eyes widened. It looked different. The scratches were still visible. The damaged wood was still there, but the guitar had been carefully restored. The loose bridge had been repaired. The strings were new. The cracks had been stabilized. But most importantly, the original marks had been preserved. The technician handed it to Elvis. Elvis inspected it. Then he handed it to Emily. She touched the wood. "My dad's scratches are still here." Elvis nodded. "Of course." "Why?" "Because they're part of the story." Emily hugged the guitar. She whispered, "Thank you." Elvis shook his head. "Don't thank me." "Why?" "Because I didn't give you this." He pointed at the guitar. "Your father did." Emily smiled. Then Elvis made another announcement. "And I'm going to give you something else." Emily looked nervous. "What?" "A new guitar." She immediately shook her head. "No." The audience laughed. Elvis laughed too. "You're going to have to stop saying no to me." Emily smiled. "But I already have one." "You have your father's guitar." He pointed at it. "And now you're going to have one you can learn on." Emily looked toward her mother through the camera. Her mother was crying. Elvis continued, "Your father's guitar should stay special." He paused. "You shouldn't have to worry about damaging it every time you practice." Emily finally nodded. "Okay." The audience applauded. Elvis looked toward the camera. "And whoever is watching this tonight," his voice became serious, "if there's a kid out there who thinks they're not good enough to play music because they don't have the right instrument," he paused, "play anyway." The audience became quiet. "You don't need the most expensive guitar. You don't need the best clothes. You don't need people telling you you're talented. You just need something to say." He looked at Emily. "And the courage to say it." That sentence became one of the most memorable moments of the night. One more question. Before we continue, be honest. Do you think talent matters more than expensive equipment? Could a child with a broken guitar still move an entire audience? Write yes or no in the comments, and tell us why. And once again, tell us what country or city you're watching from. If you're enjoying this emotional story, like the video, subscribe, and stay with us, because what happened after the cameras stopped rolling was something the television audience never saw. The show eventually came to an end. The credits began rolling. The audience slowly left. The cameras were switched off. The bright studio lights became dim. For the first time that evening, there was no television audience. No applause, no pressure. Just Elvis, Emily, her mother, and a few members of the crew. Emily was still holding her father's guitar. Elvis walked toward her. "You okay?" She nodded. "I think so." "That's good." She looked at him. "Are you okay?" Elvis laughed softly. Me? Emily nodded. You cried. Elvis smiled. Maybe a little. Why? He looked at her. Because I remembered someone. Who? My mother. Emily said nothing. Elvis continued. She believed in me before anybody else did. He looked down. When people told me I couldn't do something, she told me to keep going. Emily smiled. Like my dad. Exactly. For several seconds they stood quietly. Then Emily asked, Did you ever get scared? Elvis laughed. All the time. You did? Oh, yes. Even when you're famous? Elvis nodded. Especially then. Emily looked surprised. Why? Because when you're famous, everybody expects you to know what you're doing. He smiled. But sometimes, he shrugged, you're still just trying to figure things out. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Then she asked the question that stopped Elvis completely. Do you ever miss being a kid? Elvis looked at her. Yes, he answered without hesitation. Sometimes. What do you miss? He smiled. Being able to make mistakes without everybody watching. Emily laughed. That sounds nice. It was. Elvis looked at her old guitar. But you know something? What? Maybe that's what tonight was. What? A mistake. Emily looked confused. Elvis smiled. Everything went wrong. The guitar sounded terrible. I forgot what I was going to say. You forgot the chords. You were nervous. Emily laughed. And somehow, Elvis looked around the empty studio. It became the best thing that happened tonight. Emily smiled. Maybe my dad planned it. Elvis looked at her. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he nodded. Maybe he did. Before Emily left, Elvis gave her one final promise. Keep playing. I will. Even when you're scared. I will. Even when someone tells you you're not good enough. Emily nodded. I will. Elvis smiled. Then you've got everything you need. Emily hugged him. Elvis gently hugged her back. Neither of them knew it at that moment, but that brief embrace would become the emotional center of a story remembered by everyone who had been inside that studio. And there was still one thing left. Before Emily walked out the door, Elvis called her back. Emily? She turned around. Yes? He pointed toward the guitar. Don't ever let anybody repair away the scratches. Emily smiled. Why? Because one day, he paused, you're going to look at them and remember exactly where you came from. Emily nodded. Then she walked away. Elvis watched her disappear down the hallway. He stood there for several seconds. Then he looked at the empty stage. The cameras were gone. The audience was gone. The applause was gone. But Emily's voice was still in his mind. And for the first time in a long time, Elvis wasn't thinking about the next concert. He wasn't thinking about records. He wasn't thinking about fame. He was thinking about a 7-year-old girl, an old guitar, and a father who had left behind one simple instruction. Play anyway. But Elvis didn't yet know that Emily's story wasn't going to end when she walked out of that studio. Because the following morning, something unexpected arrived at Elvis's hotel. And inside the package was a photograph that would make him realize just how deeply that little girl had changed him. The next morning, Elvis was staying at his hotel when a small package arrived. There was no return address. Only his name was written on the envelope. Elvis opened it. Inside was a photograph. He immediately recognized Emily. She was sitting on the front steps of a small house, holding her father's old guitar. Beside her stood her father. He was smiling. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "She played because you reminded her that it was okay to dream again." Elvis stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he noticed something else inside the envelope, a small handwritten note from Emily. Dear Elvis, I practiced the song again this morning. I wasn't scared this time. Dad was right. You really do have to play anyway. Thank you for believing in me." Elvis slowly folded the note. For a man who had performed in front of thousands, the words of one 7-year-old girl affected him more than any standing ovation. He placed the photograph inside his wallet. He would carry it for years. Several weeks later, Emily received the new guitar Elvis had promised her. But when her mother opened the case, Emily didn't immediately touch it. Instead, she reached for her father's old guitar. She placed both instruments beside each other. One was new, beautiful, perfect. The other was scratched, worn, and repaired. Emily smiled. She knew which one mattered most. She began practicing, day after day, month after month. And whenever she became frustrated, she remembered Elvis's words, "Keep playing." Years later, when someone asked Emily what happened on that television show in 1969, she never talked about the applause. She never talked about being on television. She always talked about the broken guitar, and she always said the same thing. "Elvis didn't fix my life. He simply reminded me that I could keep going." Before you go, if this story touched you, like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us, where are you watching from? And answer this: if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? Because sometimes the smallest moments become the memories we carry for the rest of our lives. And sometimes, all it takes is one person believing in you to make you brave enough to play anyway.